Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon, and welcome to the Post 40, the second act, the Christmas Post. This is exciting. So let's start with something important. Let's think about the words change, transformation, and renewal. These words are incredibly easy to say. They're very difficult to render them the punctuation and momentum of your life. Well, today we're going to meet somebody who has used those words as the engine room of their life. She changes my life, and she just might change yours in the next half an hour or so. Oh my goodness me. It's my pleasure to introduce an incredible friend of mine, a 3-1 sister. We may get back to that shortly, but Dr. Sarah Casey. Dr. Sarah Casey is a senior lecturer. That's going to be important shortly. Senior lecturer in creative industries from the University of the Sunshine Coast. She achieved her PhD from Griffith University in 2015. But this was her second act. This was her second successful career that we're going to talk about in a second. So, hello, Sarah.
Hello, TB. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here on the Christmas Post, and I brought my Christmas tree.
I was going to say, it's so cool. Oh, wow, that's exciting. For people that are on some drugs at this juncture, they really enjoyed that moment, and they'll be replaying that quite a few times.
Right, and if they are on the drugs, have a look behind. There's some tinsel, there's a bit of glitter there, some sequins as well.
And as I've discussed, is that a lightsaber?
It's not quite a lightsaber, but it was $4 and it can double as one. So
that's fantastic. I love that shape that it's in your house anyway. That's tremendous.
That's right. And look, I'll put a link for everybody where you can buy one. That dress up your house for Christmas, for those of you who don't like to actually decorate a tree.
That's you're fantastic. You've transformed our life already. It's already Christmassy. That's tremendous. Now, there's so many things I want to ask you because you are legendary and people's lives will transform in the next little bit. But my first question really, and I've never asked you this for all the years we've known each other, is that you graduated from that PhD in 2015, and it really was, even though you're impossibly young, obviously, this was your second career, your second act. Could you tell us why you decided academia is the way forward for you?
Well, yes, and I thank you, Tara, for that lovely intro. I actually got my first degree when I was about 21 or so, 21, 22. And I went to university straight out of school. I grew up on a farm and I decided to do psychology, to study psychology. And I took a departure at Pavlov's dog because I realised that it wasn't about body language and star signs. So I found myself in the philosophy department, and that was my home. I did philosophy and literature, absolutely loved it, had made my mind up because I was very influenced by a beautiful academic who's at the University of York, I think now, Dr. Megan Ruffley. And I was very influenced by Dr. Megan Ruffley. She, at that time, was an English academic, an English literature academic, and also somebody who was doing philosophy, Dr. Tony Lynch at the University of New England. And I thought, and I'm a big fan of regional universities, by the way. I just want to say that straight up.
We're going to chose to go that shortly, so that's going to be important. Yes.
Oh, good, good. And I thought, I want to be a philosopher. I want to be an academic philosopher, but I actually thought, at the age of 21, 22, maybe I needed to get a little bit of life outside of postcode 4310, which is Millbon, where I grew up, and also 2350, which is Armidale. So I took myself off after my first degree, knowing that I was going on this global experience to become the philosopher, to get some life experience outside of the academy. Wow. And I ended up in Tokyo. The first job out of university. A few months later, I didn't even get to my graduation, and they conferred my degree, and I took my, I didn't go to the ceremony, but I got the degree, and I went over to Tokyo, and I lived over there, and had an amazing time, and I taught English, which was wonderful, and then I did the typical thing and misspent my youth for a little bit after that.
Hello.
love India, love Nepal, love Thailand, where I'm also going in January again, and went to lots of different places and traveled around, and then thought, okay, well, I better go back to Australia. And a few years later, I might do honours. So I enrolled in honours, and it wasn't right for me at that time. And I started doing honours, exploring at that time. Oh no, I know what I was doing. I was looking at Judith Butler's work. I became fascinated by Judith Butler. I always read academic work. Previously, I was really into the work of the French feminists, the continental philosophers.
Yes.
And so I started doing my honours around Judith Butler's work and thinking about how could people who haven't got an academic background access this really important feminist philosopher's work.
Wow.
I was interested in access points into her work because I thought, well, I've done a philosophy degree, and I was finding it really difficult. Now, this is pre-YouTube. This is pre where you could look up everything and just get an entree into something. So I think my idea was I want work to be accessible to broader publics, but it wasn't the right timing for me. By the way, I'd also worked at the Commonwealth Bank at this stage, and this is where my other sort of career trajectory, I guess, came into it. I worked at the Commonwealth Bank. I fell into it, wasn't particularly good in it. That was a retail banking job. So that was a front of house sort of thing. And then when I started doing honours, I worked at the Inns of Court in Brisbane a couple of years later, and I worked for a wonderful man, and he's now passed away. His name was Kelly McGroarty, and he was a criminal barrister. So I worked for Mr. McGroarty for a couple of years and thought, oh, I might do law. But that wasn't for me. And so I actually just did 5 minutes of that. But I stayed there for a couple of years, and some of my father's family, some of my mother's as well, but some of my father's family were actually barristers and solicitors. And I had this interest. I thought, okay, I'd like to do that. I just like arguing. What can I do?
You also have a mind for that. I've always thought, I never knew that bit of your story. I've always thought you had quite a strong legal mind, to be honest, because you're very good on the logic tree. So that's amazing to me.
It's
so
amazing.
I do. Oh, I do. So we had the moment in law, and then what happened? Keep going. I'm excited.
Then I got a job. So I started working in an insurance company. Worked there for 4 years. I think I'm quite good at reading. I like fine print. And now, as a Capricorn TB, we have the same birthday, everybody. I think reading the fine print, and it's not just been a Capricorn, it's been an academic, the fine print, looking at the details, working out problems. So I worked there for 4 years, doing a bit of this and a bit of that. And I thought, no, I've got to finish my honours.
Wow.
Academia was calling. I just needed academia. I loved it. I loved reading philosophy. So I went back, I finished my thesis about Judith Butler, and it was called Gender's a Drag, I think, at the time. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I knew you had an interest in Judith Butler. I never knew it was the honours thesis. And then from honours, you then went into the doctoral program straight through?
No, not straight through. So, yeah, I blew up my whole life at that stage. So I finished my honours. I got first class honours, got offered a scholarship the day I'd moved to England. So I finished honours, was desperate to do a PhD, but I broke down my relationship, called my wedding off, and moved to England. I know. So I thought, no.
You are the most interesting person in the world. Can I just put that out there for everybody already following this? I can see like a Netflix docudrama around your life.
Oh,
so the relationship.
Let's do it. Let's do a docudrama. I'd love it.
So then you're in England. So then you're in England, right?
Then I'm in England, and I got my first class honours. Was really happy with that, and by this stage, I have to say, because I started university, I finished school at 16, 17. So there's been a few things going on there, relationships, different things, moves around, and I was 31 by this stage.
Still so young.
So I moved to England, and so I'd done my 4 years. So I'd done about 6 years in the financial services sector by this stage. couple of years concurrently. A lot of us work. I work a lot of jobs at the same. I used to work, a few jobs concurrently, more than a full-time load. And then I thought, okay, well, I'll get a job, and I ended up working for a really big investment bank in their legal department in the derivatives section. It was quite, reading. So those eagle eye skills, I'm always saying to students, you never know where your skills will come in handy and your talents. So I worked there, and I thought, look, this is more of the same. Let me go and work at a management consultancy. So I worked in St. Paul's, so I worked in Fleet Street. Then I worked in St. Paul's in a management consultancy, a large global one that specialised in financial services. So they'd go into the big banks and do change management. Yeah. Yeah, so I was doing a bit of marketing and communication at that stage. So I did this, and so I was in England for a couple of years and thought, I really should go back and do my PhD. And it was at a time where they actually held my scholarship.
Oh my goodness me. Yes, that was in the policy a few years ago. Well done.
Yeah, so they held my scholarship, and a few other little bits and pieces happened, and it was fantastic. And I came back to Australia and I did my PhD, which as you know, I found quite challenging. And I think I found it challenging because the online landscape had changed quite significantly. The way that you'd search for information had changed. And I trained, earlier on in the disciplines.
Yes.
So I trained in literature or literary studies. I trained in philosophy, and then I did a bit of gender studies, and I wanted to do more. I thought a multidisciplinary approach was a better one for me. So I did struggle a little bit with, okay, and I'd done some cultural studies, and I liked cultural studies, but I was starting to find cultural studies a little bit challenging, which affected me a little bit along the way. And I had to find my own path, and I got there in the end. So in 2015, I got the PhD. I'd started teaching at university. And loved it. Started teaching many years before. Absolutely loved teaching. And one thing, and I went to Griffith University, and I'm just going to say I absolutely loved being at Griffith. I loved the way that Griffith had this multidisciplinary approach. Interdisciplinarity was really favoured. The humanities valued, as far as I could see anyway. So I got the opportunity, and I was teaching into ethics, into gender studies, into sociology, into communication, and I just had an absolutely wonderful time there. And when I thought, okay, the market's pretty dim. I want to get a job, but I don't want to be in the financial services sector any longer. So I looked into academic skills advising, and I thought, I'm not going to sit on the sessional train if I can help it, because I saw a lot of people getting quite down.
Yes.
And it's not always a choice. I don't know it's a really hard thing to do. So I started to look in the last year, how can I get work? How can I get work that's going to sustain me while I, build to the next stage? And so I did 2 jobs at Griffith. One as an academic skills advisor in arts educational law, absolutely loved it. And then I did a job with the amazing Keithia Wilson doing student success and retention work within the School of Humanities as well. So I did both of those, and I actually didn't apply for a single academic job because I loved them so much. And I co-authored the 6th edition of a textbook at that stage. I was doing a bit of academic work. Yeah, and then the Sunshine Coast, I got a call up, and the wonderful Professor Phil Graham put me on a contract for 10 months. Loved it, loved everything about it, loved working with Phil, and then I got offered an ongoing role after.
See, that is unbelievable. I knew about a third of that because I think I came into the party. You and I met, I think, when you were early on at Griffith, I think. That's right.
And also I was struggling with cultural studies, and I read your work. Oh, look, I knew you. Yeah, I knew you. But I read your work, and I'm like, oh my goodness, thank goodness. Somebody is saying this stuff. And it was about the bandana, what did you say? It was about the disc. I've used the quote a number of times. It's early here, everybody, forgive me. And I thought, thank goodness, somebody's got a sense of humour.
Yeah, and look, cultural studies, it is our beloved mistress that endlessly disappoints us, and we believe in her, and she hurts us, and we believe in her, and she hurts us, but we still believe in her. And your commitment and engagement with cultural studies through philosophy and through some very careful French theory and through Butler is transformative of cultural studies in this country. So that's that's so inspirational for people to hear that narrative, SC, that these are the jobs. And it's like, oh, you know, what's happening with employment? What you've just expressed there, that's what work looks like now. That is what a career looks like now. But my next question is about regional universities, right? So
Yes.
so you're country lass, and you have committed, and I love you for this, you have committed to regional universities. You are an activist academic and you've committed to regional universities. Why?
Why? Okay, because I believe that living in the regions, regional, rural and remote students should have absolutely the same opportunities, online and face-to-face. I chose to go to a regional university. I think a lot of kids who are from the bush, and I went to a bigger school that wasn't in town, but wasn't in the country area, it wasn't on the farm. I wasn't homeschooled or anything like that, but should have those, absolutely have those opportunities to go to university and be there in person. So I chose to go to a regional university, but a lot of bush kids, my point was, a lot of bush kids can feel quite overwhelmed going into those bigger spaces. And we know that to succeed at university, that sense of connection is absolutely critical. You need the purpose. I'm referring to Lizio here, but yeah, you need that purpose. You need the connection. You need that sense of why am I here?
Yeah.
As well as your community. You need all of those. And there's other aspects, of course, in the, So that's why I chose to. But why do I stay? So I went to Griffith. And then I've taught for other universities as well, but the regional universities are really, really important because you get a lot of students who are first in family, lower SES, mature age people, mature age women in particular, as well. In my particular family, education transformed my mother's family and, you know, generations there. So I'm passionate about, I come from, on that side, a family of educators. Regional education is really important. And I think that we need to invest more into regional universities.
Yes.
And not see regional universities as a place where people go to start their careers and finish them.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. And it's not a secondary choice either, SC. The best people in the country must commit to our regional universities. That is how we transform regional, rural and remote Australia. And I would argue regional, remote, the planet, really. And I think too often, as you've said, and I am one of those people that started my career at wonderful Central Queensland, but I have kept going back because it changes lives. It is the place where that granular engagement, you can see economic development, social development, cultural development, right?
That's right. And it's not this added extra of a place that we can sometimes, pop in and out of. This is not a holiday destination where I am at the moment, the Sunshine Coast. This is people's lives, and it services much broader footprints. It also services the Moreton region, which is on the outskirts of Brisbane. And I want people to have those opportunities and not just be seen as, oh, you're just doing that because you didn't get into one of the group of 8. Now, I'm not a group of 8 people, sorry, group of 8 people, but I would prefer to work with those people who perhaps wouldn't have those opportunities otherwise. And I'm not going to, you meet people where they're at, but I don't think we're doing anyone a service by saying we'll make this easier. I think we provide people with the support without being patronising. And
as your old mate has always described it, you can maintain standards without standardisation.
Oh, love it. Love it. We need that on a t-shirt.
I will. I'll make that into a t-shirt. We will spread the profits throughout our feminist collective. Now, feminist collective, I want to talk about a series that you've produced that I'm completely obsessed with, right? So, Real Stories of Country Women. I think what you have done there is some of the most important work that the humanities and the social sciences have done in Australia. So could you tell us about the real stories and why you made the decision to disseminate that research in such an unusual way? People talk about Nitro's non-traditional research outputs, and yet you made a decision to go there with that series. Tell us about it and tell us why that was the dissemination mode.
Okay, so you might have already picked up, I was doing this in my honours thesis, trying to find access points into really difficult ideas. Doesn't mean that you actually have to make them so accessible that they're not actually academic anymore. The one thing that I wanted to do I was passionate about regional, rural and remote and inclusion, digital inclusion. I was passionate about social, cultural, all sorts. I wanted to hear people's stories in their own voices. So the Real Stories of Country Women started off as a documentary series, a micro-documentary series that I created with Dr. Joanna McIntyre, who's now at Swinburne University. Hi, Jo. And Dr. Gail Crimmins, who you know, at the University of Sunshine Coast. Gail's just become an associate professor.
Congratulations, Gail. We love you, Gail.
Congratulations, Gail. And so we started this and we went to the Merway Shire, which is Charleville. Hello, Merway Shire. Charleville, Roma, Paru Shire, so Wyandra in southwest Queensland. Went to all of these locations, Roma, Surat, hello Surat Aboriginal Corporation. And we went to all of these different places and wanted to hear the stories of women. So we produced 17 micro-documentaries. We came up with a number of themes from there, one of which is that these women are actually reinventing their whole communities.
Yeah.
They were living, the drought was, so most of Queensland was drought declared at that stage, and it was an 8-year prolonged drought. So really extreme conditions these people were living under. And it was quite shocking, some of the content that we heard. And of course, for me, it was personal in many ways, because I had, my family's been doing farming for 5 generations. So I'd heard stories and I saw how tough these people were, and they were at breaking point, but there was hope in some way. I don't want to be all naff, but what they were doing was using the internet when they could get it, when they could get reliable internet. Don't start me on the NBN, but good in some places, nothing black and white, but they were creating off-farm income sources to keep their families on the land that they loved. Yes. And I thought there's something in this. Okay, social media. So then we created the next project out of the documentary series, and we wanted the dissemination, by the way. We wanted people to hear these women's stories. We wanted their own voices to be used. So we weren't even in those videos, even though we be bit show-offy, some of us, but we interviewed amazing women from these particular areas. If you haven't seen them, Rude Jude at Charleville, amazing. And then we thought, right, okay, we'll now create those documentary series were viewed organically. I was all about the organic reach. I didn't want to pay for anybody so just a little, like this little area, we got 48,000 views on those documentaries. That's within a little bit. Yeah, it was great. And it got picked up by, this is, I think, important. It's not, I'm not saying this to lack humility at all. Like, I don't mean it. I was on the radio about it and, did bits of media and kept reinforcing it was about the stories of the women. And that's when I got picked up for my first Commonwealth Roundtable to talk about, to hopefully impact and influence policy in some way. And one of the women said to me, thank you, we've got a voice there. Thought, me? Okay, so big mouth. Yes, good. Thank you. If that's all I can do is to say to the minister, these are the problems. They don't need your, resilience workshops. These women are tough. What they need is actual support to do X, Y, and Z. And that's what they're saying, not what I'm saying. And I was next to the head of the CWA at that round table. Loved it. The toughest women ever.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But see, my argument is if you hadn't chosen that alternative dissemination mode, that impact and engagement with policy would not have occurred. Have I over-egged that?
No, you're absolutely right. That's my whole if we hadn't have done that micro documentary series and we hadn't have pushed it out through social media is really, really important, and got onto the radio, ABC Country Hour, love you, and yes, love the ABC, and different forms of media, we would never have been noticed. And people talk about networking. You've heard me, networking. It's actually about do the work, be authentic, or whatever that means, be genuine, do the work, do it for people. Don't do it for yourself. This self-interested nonsense, it just annoys me. And I think we're getting, so I think that the general public can smell a rat. If you're not a rat, you can get cut through, because just being you is enough, and to tell the stories honestly and openly. And that really helped. And it wasn't about my career, it was actually about, I really wanted to help get these stories out, and that was a fantastic format. And I knew this from my PhD. I'll go back for a sec. When I was doing my PhD, I did a campaign with a friend who shall remain nameless, and it's featuring in our upcoming book called #Feminisms. And it was a campaign where we were campaigning against somebody who wanted to be an MP in Queensland, who'd said some pretty shocking things. And our point was, you cannot be drafting the laws of this state while you have those views. And so we are going to campaign against this, and we did that. And from that, we got $250,000 to help women. So for a women's helpline for domestic violence or sexual assault rather. So there could be crossover there with DV or family violence. And I thought, okay, so you need public. That got me a lot of public impact. Not me, the campaign as such. So we wouldn't have been able to secure that $250,000 for that service had we not started to do, it wasn't a dissemination. The petitioning is a little bit different, but I think I'm always about, as an academic, I want to engage with the public in different ways.
And Esty, the thing is, what I love about you and why I find you such an inspirational human is that you are always authentic. You always put yourself second and the ideas and the people first. And in our current age environment, I must not get upset because I will, but in our current age environment, what you are doing is transformative. And look, the story goes on. So I want to engage Neighbours. Now, you know, I sleep with a physicist, and he is a very, very great friend of yours.
But I love him.
And he loves you. Who would have known, not that you'd be sleeping with a physicist, because that's not where this question is going. The question is going with Neighbours and your movement into citizen science. Now, that was a surprise for me, but probably it shouldn't have been. Tell us about this, because this is crucial, and this demonstrates the lie of the separation between the sciences and the arts and humanities, and you build it together. So tell us about Neighbours.
Well, I was very, very lucky on this one. And so one of my wonderful colleagues, Dr. Andy Ward, just promoted to senior lecturer as well. Hello, Andy. Andy Ward is exceptional at bringing people together and taking ideas and making them accessible. And that's what I love. And we work really, really well together. So he was actually organised for us to work as a team, a little creative media and communication team within the broader No Burn project. So No Burn stands for, it doesn't stand for no burning, it stands for National Bushfire Resilience Network. And they're scientists at the University of the Sunshine Coast, but it's actually a national project. So we're at the Sunshine Coast, and Dr. Sam Van Holsbeek is actually leading it with Professor Mark Brown and Professor Paul Salmon. There's lots of them, Paul Salmon as well. Some really amazing scientists and human factors researchers. And then they knew that they needed creative media, communication academics to help with the messaging. So we've got 4 of us, Dr. Harry Dugmore, Shannon Horsfall, who's doing a PhD, is our designer. I do the media side of it, and Andy does and oversees events and all sorts of things. He created a sting. So there'll be a lot coming from that. And there's a citizen science app for people who can go out into forests, into the bush, and take photos, and this is being released soon, and take photographs of particular types of trees, leaves, etc. And then they're using AI, predictive modeling, all sorts of things for data to help us understand bushfire risk and prevent it. They're also so it's a really exciting project, and it's all about this broad dissemination of ideas, but actually engaging the public into actually being part of the research team as well. And it's a newer space for me, and I am loving it. I love working alongside the scientists.
And see, SC, this is why we got into this business. That's why we got into the public comprehensive university, to build up these relationships. And what we want, and I think it particularly happens in the regional universities, is that there's a much more porous relationship between the disciplines. So I'm thrilled where this is going to go.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that we can do that. I don't think I would have had this opportunity at other universities, or other non-regional universities, I'd say. And I've been really fortunate in terms of people actually taking an interest in. So I don't know if I've told you about, we've got another project that Gail and I are actually popping off to Fiji with Professor Patrick Nunn in February to do some other research. And Patrick is incredible, and he's one of the world's leading climate scientists. He's a lead author for the IPCC and has done various other really important, impressive research. And the way that I met Patrick is that we were doing a panel on communicating climate change in the public. So I'm all about that. Let's do some public panels. So we did it at one of the Sunshine Coast large establishments, and we had two marine scientists, amazing ones from the University of Sunshine Coast. We had Dr. Leah Barclay, who looks at sound and health of the environment. Love Leah. We had a journalist on there as well, and Patrick talking about, okay, let's look at this from multiple angles. How can we communicate this crisis? What's going on here? To talk. And so that's where we came up with it. And Patrick had said he became interested in the way that Gail and I were looking at how women are actually, and a few others of us as well, recreating themselves, and not countering, that's not the right word, but for short term, medium term solutions to sort of help weather the effects of climate change. So we're going to Charleville, hello Charleville again, and Fiji, to do interviews with women who've actually been creating alternative income sources.
Oh, this is unbelievable. And look, the interesting thing is you're a senior lecturer in creative industries, and why a lot of us got into the creative industries with, parking the neoliberal component of it, was because we believed in small and medium-sized enterprise development, and they were often female-headed organisations, and it allowed women particularly to have those alternative income streams. That's why we got into this business. So the idea that you're going there now is unbelievable, and leads to my next question about, you would think we know each other, leads to my next question about leadership. Now, you are a great academic leader and lead through activism. And I've never asked you this question. How are you working with leadership now? How do you define the term? How do you take it for a walk?
I think with leadership, we're doing some work at the moment around leadership, as you know, from our Real Rural Women's Leadership Project that I did with the wonderful Professor Jackie Hewitt, Dr. Karen Hand, Saskia Clerk, and Gail Crimmins. I sound like a salesperson. I should just put up the little cards. And one thing that I've noticed, and I've thought a lot about it because I've led a few projects, and when you lead projects, and I was a mature age, PhD, as you know, but as a junior academic, so as a level B, you do come up against some problems where you're often leading people who are much higher than you, or we have different ways of working, I guess. And, so in terms of leadership, I worked out from the interviews and from myself that I need to work with people who have a community focus, as opposed to an individual focus, for the teams to really function well. But you're not always going to get that. You're not always going to get it. So I think good leaders from the interviews that I've taken, actually have really clear communication. We can't be scared. So communicating clearly, without being aggressive about it is a really good thing. It's setting up the expectations early is something I've had to learn to do, because I thought, oh no, I'll just do it, and you end up martyring yourself and putting your neck out and all of that sort of stuff. Setting up the expectations early.
Yeah.
Saying, okay, I'll do this, you do this. What do we think? Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
I think that was really good, and I like organisation. So sending.
You do, and I see, because when I talk about leadership now, and I'm a lot older than you, right? And
you are not.
I'm haggard and weathered. But can I say, when I think about leadership, as I've got older and I do very diverse leadership structures now, the listening matters the most. Actually knowing most of the time you need to be quiet and you lead through listening. I mean, does that work particularly in regional environments for you?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I've learned a lot from other people, because I think making the assumption that everyone will work or everyone will want to be, driven by the same things as you is a big mistake. Working out what motivates other people, why they're doing what they're doing, is a really good thing. And you can't take it personally.
Yeah.
So listening and trying to build bridges rather than getting annoyed all the time is an amazing thing to actually get your head around. And it's much more complicated than it seems. I tend to get on well with most people, but sometimes you do need to have a little bit of a clear boundary when you are leading. And I've strangely led quite a lot of people in different environments. Yeah.
No, you have. It's unbelievable. And in some ways that probably leads us to the next question, because you have just been promoted to senior lecturer. Now, I know people are watching this going, so why isn't this woman a pro vice chancellor or a deputy chancellor? And I think it's a mystery too. But she's just been promoted to senior lecturer. And like many of us, SC, you've had to fight for that promotion. You've had to grab it with your fingernails and pull yourself up. Now, what advice would you offer to people? Because obviously people get so disappointed through promotion systems and structures. What advice would you offer to people who have applied for promotion, and how to manage the disappointments and the challenges and the vagaries of that sort of institutional culture?
Oh, this is a hard one, because I think be upset. Talk to your people. But the way that I would do it is to be, well, the way I hope I did this, I don't know, when I was rejected, is be gracious. And I don't think, taking publicly about it really helps.
No.
I don't know. Like, I do think there's a stand up for yourself. You're looking at my lipstick there, aren't you? Yeah, stand up.
No, I'm drawn, because it is such a complicated thing, because you're so filled with disappointment and angst, and you don't know whether to focus it inside or outside. When I was knocked back for promotion, I think it was to Aspro, and I got it on appeal. So I had to really front up and explain through appeal the processes that were, but it was very, very difficult. And you try to park the emotion, but it's so emotional. I think that's why I asked you the question.
Yeah, it's so emotional. I think let the emotion go. Find out the appeals process if you think that there's a case, and seek that advice, and seek out the help of supportive others, people who've been through this process as well. Because what I found, thank you, Brabs, what I found is that most people had been rejected and not been unsuccessful. So that actually also helps. I don't think comparing yourself to others in terms of that person got it and I didn't is really helpful. We're humans. We're going to have a bit of that going on at times, but comparing and saying I should have got it, etc. I learned to be a little bit smarter, and I learned to say no in the 2 years, because I didn't get it, and then I had to wait 2 years to go. So I got to a C within 5 years, and I thought, I've been leading all these projects and teaching all these. I had a really, like a pretty big teaching and leadership role. Head of program. And so I learned to say no a little bit more. I learned that I had to stop doing the cleaning up. I had to stop doing the Mr. Sheening and the floor sweeping.
Yes.
Because we've come, stop it, just stop it. And the world's not going to collapse and the university will keep going.
Yeah.
Well, you have a rest. So I learned to rest a little bit more. May not look like it today, but yeah, I think. And I also, and I've got a really amazing support network. You, JQ, Phil, Jackie, my colleagues at the Sunshine Coast, and different people, support network who can actually say and put things into a bit of perspective as well. And this is not forever. We are not our careers. We are more than that. Okay. We do a lot of it, you know, because we deeply believe in the public service. I think that's what all of those people and Keithy Wilson as well, I'm going to mention here, but as well, we do it because we believe in something bigger and that public service aspect. And so for me, aligning with people who had similar values, who've been through this before,
yes.
Yeah, I found strength in that.
Yes, and learning to manage the appointment. I suppose I was always PSC, and I hope I pass this on to you, because obviously when you apply for a promotion, and I was fortunate because it was actually Murdoch University at that point, they had problems with their process, so I just revealed those problems and was promoted to Astro, and then went on to a British chair. But I had the experience of Steve, the late Steve Redhead too. He applied for professor 5 times. And he had 10 books and 100 plus refereed articles, millions of pounds, dollars, euros. And it was just the vagaries of the leadership at that point went, you know, well, Steve, just a little bit more, Steve, just a little bit more. And so with someone with 10 books who's knocked back 5 times, then
unbelievable.
I always hope that I learnt from that, and then you pass that learning on to other colleagues, and we stand with you. So if you feel crumble through this, we help you stand up for a while and keep walking. And you've handled that brilliantly, and I think the career will just keep firing on for this point, which leads me then to the new book. I'm so excited, #Feminisms. Now, this is a great book. I have had the privilege of reading an earlier version of it.
Thank you.
Which is exciting. But you've entered the really difficult space, Esty, of online activism, but all the trolling and so forth that occurs in that space. So what drew you to write a book on this quite difficult and occasionally toxic area?
Oh, that's right. And I still sometimes, as you know, get a few butterflies around it, because it can be a really toxic space. Participation isn't equal. Voices aren't always heard. We know this. Voices aren't heard equally. Some voices are louder than others, and not always right and taken up as experts in particular areas. So these are problematic areas to write in. But I am fascinated, and I think it came through, and we talk about that campaign I did through my PhD with the unnamed friend, my colleague, about how you can actually make slight change. You know, that he wasn't disendorsed, this guy, he wasn't disendorsed. He ended up becoming the MP. 1 term, I take credit for it. Yeah.
Nice, Alicia.
Yeah, bye. Where are you now? Sorry, that's awful, but yeah, it's gone. See ya. And the internet was really powerful because it was one of the earlier campaigns in Australia. So we did that in 2011, 2012.
Wow.
And I wanted to really track in some way, in a small way, what has changed since online petition. Where are we all tired from it? You know, have we got petition fatigue? Are we just sick of supporting all of these causes? Is it clicktivism? Is it slacktivism? What's going on? Is it just echo chambers of people, you know, propping up their mates' views? And so that's where that came from. But there was something in it that I thought, no, I don't want my work to be contained in, as much as I love libraries, I'm a big fan of libraries, I don't want my work to be contained in a book in a library.
No.
So that's why we did that campaign, and then looked at a little bit more and thought, how can people get the messages out, you know, get the messages more clearly? So I was looking at, and then the broad public here, sorry, that's very inarticulate, but around #activism, what's going on there, what's happening with celebrity feminists, media feminists, who are getting, you know, different types of spaces in the media. You know, the media's changed so much. It's not just, you know, we're not just watching Koshi and Carl Stepanovic on telly anymore with the Girls on the Grill type panels. Thank goodness. Yeah. So what's happening with these media voices? We've got a lot of newer and emerging voices getting space in and through social media, as well as on and different in other platforms as well. But is it just white feminists? What's going on here? And the Me Too movement, of course, happened.
Indeed.
So then we had enough is enough in Australia. This is a global, well, in the global north, a bit of a groundswell was happening, and in some of the areas in the global south as well, where women's voices and non-binary and gender diverse people's voices were starting to be heard in other ways. But is it enough? How can we increase it? We always know that change is incremental. So I guess that's a 10-year little bit of a history in Australia. A small point. We had Destroy the Joint here that happened around Julia Gillard and Alan Jones saying, women are, and he was talking about I think her name's Christine. I can't remember. You have to read the book, everybody. #Feminisms.
Yes.
Out soon.
I'll do the link to it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so Alan Jones did that in 2012. Julia Gillard did the misogyny speech. Also, we know that there are problems around this. Julia Gillard did the misogyny speech on the same day that she took away benefits for single mothers, so these are really complicated areas. And I think I wanted to look at public access to these ideas and information, what's happening out there. Is it just a bunch of academics talking to each other on Twitter? That's not going to affect serious change, is it? So, yeah.
And look, why I was so impressed by this book, and as I said, I've read it and I absolutely love it, is that you didn't get lost in representational politics. I'm reading Steve Hall and Simon Winlow's book at the moment, The Death of the Left, and the challenge with identity politics and atomization of politics is exactly what you've stated there. So this remarkable speech, misogyny speech, can come out at the same time as rights and opportunities and funding is removed from a group that's incredibly disempowered. So why I think this is such a great book is that you manage those paradoxes, you manage the contradiction in and of identity politics. So I'm very impressed by it. I think it will be transformative to how we think about progressive politics, leftist politics, social change, and feminism in and through that, which of course leads me to my final absolutely crucial question, which you knew we'd go here. And I'm talking about, Pat the Rat. I'm talking about Karl Stakanovic. I'm talking about Toady. And obviously I'm talking about really where you and I met, and that is Mark Hunter Studies. So SC, we will do that conference. We are going to do a Mark Hunter Studies conference. That is going to come soon.
Well, we need Juliet, my co-author of #Feminisms, to be the keynote with you. Yes. She's, Mark Hunter Studies City.
It's there. Now, why, I think how you and I sort of met originally was about the belief that you have in popular culture and what popular culture does to the planet. But there is no doubt that popular cultural studies, as a part of cultural studies, in many ways is dying and perhaps is dead and perhaps is a zombie, which might be appropriate. So what drew you to popular culture, and why do you think, Essie, and this is a hard question, why do you think that popular cultural studies is not where it should be in the intellectual vista?
Oh, look, that's a big one. Yeah. I could talk about the high-low cultural binary, etc. That's been going on for forever. But I actually think it's, no, I don't want to blame individual academics on this.
No.
I think neoliberalism and careerist aspirational behaviours that are encouraged in the competitive contemporary university, perhaps, the push for grant funding.
Yeah.
The push for grant funding, it might be a big issue in this. Would you agree with that? Or
look, mate, I would. And I think the difference is in the UK, popular cultural studies survived a bit more because it tethered itself to sport as well. So sport and gaming. So because it was the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and that's how the creative industries were configured in the UK, popular cultural studies has survived quite well. When it was imported, I would argue, relatively inelegantly, particularly to Queensland, gaming was lost and sport was lost. So therefore we sort of ended up with high culture, with maybe a bit of popular music attached to it, sort of. So I think that's why when the funding was devolved from the area, that particular group of academics that are interested in funded research just moved away from it. That's one argument I perhaps have. What do you think?
I think people are now being pushed to find funding, and in particular ways. So there's an inauthenticity, perhaps.
Yeah.
I don't know. No, that's not right. Like, I have to give this one a bit more thought.
Yeah. And you had a fantastic article in the conversation on Neighbours. It's like it went viral, girlfriend, and it's like one of the articles of the year and stuff. And it was on the end of Neighbours. So in this weird environment, that infusion of popular culture exploded. So how in your own head do you manage that contradiction?
Yeah, it's interesting because with the end of Neighbours, I put a pitch out. Is Neighbours feminist, and was Neighbours feminist, etc. And we got into the Conversations 2022 book. And I keep saying to people, it says on the front cover, nation's biggest thinkers. So we're up there with people talking about geopolitical issues, all these really, really important issues. And we've got Neighbours there, right? Now, Neighbours is important. It wasn't just a moment. It was half my life. Actually, no, I'm not. It was more than half my life. And I grew up on it. I grew up on Neighbours and a bit of Home and Away. And these are important. But then we started to think about, so I wrote this one with Juliet Watson at RMIT. We started to think about, okay, so there were really strong, hi Juliet, some really strong women in popular culture helping us along the way. We had Pat the Rat from Sons and Daughters. B. Smith, Prisoner, the original Prisoner, thank you. I'm a fan of Wentworth, but let's go back to the real Prisoner. Yeah, used to send me roses, and
but that was on the outside. Things were different then. Don't even get me started. Like B, my role model. B, my role model. You had
B forever, and then we had all sorts of and Charlene, of course, Kylie Minogue. With the mechanic challenging boundaries. And is Neighbours feminist? Was Neighbours feminist? It's coming back, so we'll wait and see. But no, it wasn't. But it did help to track the changes in our everyday lives.
Yeah.
Popular culture does that. It reflects social change in so many ways. And I think, Neighbours was the first show to have the first Australian soap to have Georgie Stone, trans actor.
Yep.
Actress on there. We also had the first same-gender marriage on Neighbours as well, with Aaron and David.
Brilliant.
Neighbours was groundbreaking in many ways, and I think with popular culture it can actually track and trace, well, we know this, what's going on outside and reflect our social anxieties too, because when Charlene was a mechanic, they wanted to marry her off though to Scott, really young Jason Donovan. So there's all sorts of contradictions going on there as well. That wouldn't happen now. It wouldn't be, particularly groundbreaking that a woman was a mechanic.
Yeah, but that's because of Charlene.
Yeah, that's right.
And so why I'm so proud of you, SC, is that you got in there, and in a time where popular culture is just dismissed. I mean, in Australia, it's in Australian academic life, it's invisible. It's stunningly invisible. And you got in there with our Juliet, and you fought it through, and you created a wedge and a space for it to exist. So we are all credit to you in tough times.
Thank you so much, because Juliet, looks at women experiencing homelessness and older women as well as pregnant women experiencing homelessness. And my area really is looking now at women in extreme weather conditions. And creating off-farm income sources and citizen science, my new area, as well, and communicating of that. But the popular culture side is so important, and we won't stop doing that, and we won't stop doing that work. It's not our sideline, it's not our side hustle. We joke that it is, but it's not, because something was really happening when that's how we came together actually, with our work, because we both watched Carl Stefanovic and Koshi through our PhDs on morning, and we were rage watching.
Yes, love a bit of rage watching. And look, it. They deserve it. And alternative spaces, we hope, are going to be created from this work. Now, Esty, I want to thank you for your friendship for over a decade. I think it must be a decade.
It is, yeah, yep.
I want to thank you for your friendship. I want to thank you for your wit. I want to thank you for your incredible, intelligent work that in dark and difficult times you create a light where I didn't know a light could exist. So happy Christmas, SC. Happy holidays to all our friends, however you celebrate. And we've got the tree. And SC, thank you for sharing this time.
Thank you so much, Brabs. Can I just say one thing? I'd just like to say thank you to UTV. If I had, look, I'd be a wealthy woman if I had 50 cents for every single time somebody says, I said 50 cents, you know, because everyone says $1. 50 cents for every single time someone talks about how your vlogs, your work have, and I know you're very humble, but have changed their lives, got them through their PhDs. But, you know, and I've said this to you before, your work translates outside. I've got family members who've watched your vlogs around bullying.
Yeah.
This work is so important, and I want to thank you because I know that you do a lot more than most people ever would.
Oh,
and
yes.
Thank you. And
I was going to say, and SC, what I also want to say is just thank you for your friendship, because I think it is very important that women particularly, and women and non-binary identifying colleagues in a time of TERFs and Karens and all the rest of it, that we show a very strong community and that people get on and support each other and move forward in their careers. So
that's right. I think so, absolutely. And I'm so grateful for your friendship and JQ's as well.
And you are fantastic. So happy holidays, my queen.
Happy holidays.
And on we go. And I hope it's a wonderful new year for you. And I know it will be.
Thank you. And right back at you, sister.
And we wish you love, light, and peace.
And crystals.
And crystals. Sarah and Tara, out.
Out. Peace out.